Anytime? Okay. It is 6:30 and I would like to please call to order the Special Planning Advisory Committee for Monday, January 29th. We're here at the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex. We're not in the council chambers though. We're up here in the dining room. So thank you all for coming. As recording of attendance, I notice that everyone from the committee is here and at the table, as well as Mr. Knopper, Mr. Henderson, and our applicants. Thank you very much. And as we begin, we recognize that we are. I was afraid of that. That's what I was afraid of the most. I've got a microphone. Oh, hello, hello. Can you hear me now? Is that better? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So as we get started, we do recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Peskotomouhkati people. And we welcome you tonight to our meeting. For the committee, we have our agenda in front of us. Do I have a mover to accept the agenda? Mr. Cross as a mover, Ms. Harland has seconded. If everyone's ready for the question, if everyone approves of the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? There being none, we'll move forward with that agenda. Thank you very much. We have our next item is declaration of conflict of interest. Is there anyone at the table that has a conflict of interest with tonight's agenda? No, there being none, we will proceed. Thank you very much. So we're on our agenda tonight. We have one item. We have the St. Mary's First Nations various application for a lobster holding facility. It is PAC number 240101. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Alex Henderson to take us through his planning report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going to be a moment. Thank you. So yeah, this is a variance application. St. Mary's First Nation is the applicant and they're here tonight. All right, so the background. The applicant is requesting that a lobster holding facility be considered a similar to or compatible with light industrial use, which is a permitted use in the rural zone. The variance was originally considered and approved by the PRAC, so the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission. That was in October of 2022. That approval, however, was subject to an appeal to the Assessment and Planning Appeal Board of the Province of New Brunswick. Now, the Assessment and Planning Appeal Board referred that application back to PRAC. It's now PAC due to changes with territory and local government reform. And they had directions for the notice and for the planning report. So those directions were followed. And this application is being represented tonight to the PAC. Now, the PAC may give consideration to the appeal board's directions, and in doing so, they have a chance to look at the file again, and they can affirm, revoke, or vary the original decision that the PRAC made in 2022. The applicant was offered a chance to submit additional information to address concerns raised by the appellants to the Assessment and Planning Appeal Board. So the applicant submitted more detail and how they're addressing issues of noise, odor, discharge, and they revised their site plan to include a buffer that would deal with some of the issues. Staff were tasked with addressing the appeal board's questions in their plan report, and so that's addressed throughout this presentation. Now, further, the details of the development proposal remain largely the same since 2022. So the owner of the subject lot is St. Mary's First Nation, and they're proposing a 7,000 square foot cold water live lobster holding facility consisting of 2 holding tanks with combined capacity for 80,000 pounds of lobster. No on-site processing would occur, and the holding tanks would discharge into the Shamcook Harbor. The outtake pipe for a discharge is approved by the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development under a license of occupation. So that's dealt with separately. The lobster holding facility itself doesn't trigger an EIA, environmental impact assessment, but it may trigger one if their saltwater well consumption is beyond 7.6 gallons per minute or more than 50 cubic meters a day. Normally, what's applied is sand filters. In this case, they're going to be using sand filters to treat the saltwater discharge coming out of the live lobster holding tanks. The applicant's facility is proposed to have the most activity during lobster season, but will remain largely dormant during the year, the months of August through October. The traffic is projected to consist of 4 to 6 cube vans and 3 to 4 trucks daily with a maximum of 8 employees on site. Odor generated by the waste dead lobsters is proposed to be controlled by storing the waste in sealable 200-liter drums. And once the drum is filled, it's moved into a refrigerated trailer. And when that trailer is full, it's taken to the regional landfill. So the property in question is a vacant shorefront lot. It's directly adjacent to a residential lot to the north. We'll have pictures of this later. And it's also adjacent to a lot to the south, encompassing the tip of Shamcook Point. So according to Service New Brunswick, this is assessed as industrial land, unimproved and unserviced. That's the point. That's the land to the south. We'll have pictures of that later as well. The point and all the surrounding lands were historically used for a major but short-lived sardine canning facility built in 1912 called the Canadian Sardine Company. And so there's still remnants of the foundation, but nothing remains to this day. So it's vacant right now. Recently, the subject lot and the surrounding shorelines on Shamcook Harbor have been used for clamming and seaweed harvesting activities. The point is mapped as an access to intertidal areas. And the rural plan encourages access to Shamcook Harbor for both commercial sea harvesting and recreational boating activities. Now, I will note that this property is private, so it's noted as a potential tidal access, but you should check into that before you use it. The subject lot and surrounding area have been zoned for general rural development under the rural zone. The rural zone includes a mixture of uses. It permits residential and non-polluting light industrial uses by right. The light industrial use definition is the closest analog in the rural plan to a lobster holding facility. The reason why there's a need for a similar to or compatible variance is that the rural plan definition for light industrial does not reference handling live species, which can have different land use implications than storing, packaging, shipping inert products that have already prepared materials. The rural plan does not have definitions for fishery uses occurring inside buildings, but outdoor fishery activities in Shamcook Harbor were indeed envisioned by the rural plan. So notice of tonight's meeting and the application were given to property owners within 1 kilometer radius of the subject lot. We also gave more notice time than we're required to provide residents an opportunity to respond. And this is consistent with the appeal board's directions. The PAC has received multiple letters from residents that have expressed objections to this application, including but not limited to loss of residential character, heavy industrial intrusion, safety for considering traffic, poor road conditions, and concern about noise, odor, enforcement, and pollution in general. Staff have consulted with officials and experts at Department of Environment and Local Government regarding the application and potential for pollution and recommendations for environmental conditions. We received a comment from DTI technician, the district engineer and superintendent were unavailable. And they explained that the development would be subject to an access permit because they're proposing to move the access location, and that a setback access permit could be made in the same application. And also they had comment that the driveway needs to be limited to 12 meters wide for the paved portion, and that if the well is within the right of way, 10.5 meters from the center line, then they would also require a highway usage and occupancy permit. So that was information which they supplied today on those last points there. So here's a picture, and perhaps some people in the audience can't see this, unfortunately, but this is all from the package which you would have had access to online or in the town office. But this is showing a picture of the subject lot and the area. The nearby residential buildings are marked in pink. So you can see here right to the north, the closest neighbor, and then also to the west. We have pictures as well showing this. Just another picture of the subject lot. Here's the noticed area. So it goes as far as Minister's Island and across the Shamcook Harbor, and taking in a number of properties in Harkness. Now, under the DTI map book, this property is shown as a local road, but they mark it as in good condition. Now, this is the unofficial DTI map book, and I realize that some people are laughing because they know the road is not in fantastic shape, but this is what we got from the department, what's published online. So no, it's deemed to be it's maintained public road, and there's no non-maintained status to this road. So the intent is to have the road maintained. So this is the entrance of St. Andrews North Road. If you're coming in from Harkness, looking up Harkness, going down St. Andrews North Road. So just note that there's a 30-kilometer-an-hour and a curvature there. So you have to go slow. This is looking at from the lot towards the neighbor to the north. This is looking out into Shamcook Harbor, down Shamcook Harbor towards Minister's Island. And that's an aerial photo that we took, just taking in some of the fishery activities are going on. So there's some boats that are moored right off the shore there, and one that's pulled up onto shore. This is a shot of Peskotomouhkati Bay, so you can see Minister's Island, Kilmarnock Head. This is an aerial photo of the site with the current access. Now they're proposing to move that further to the south away from their neighbor to the north. So that's the neighbor to the north, and here's the neighbor to the west. So this access point would move somewhere around here. Now here's some of the residential properties that are close by. So you can see the areas has been built up for residential purposes. Here's just another shot. And here's some of the residential properties to the west of the point. And here's a picture of the point, and you can see some of the old foundations from the former cannery. So here's the applicant's proposed site plan. Now, this is a revised site plan from what you would have seen if you were part of this meeting in October of 2022. They've since moved the access location as we talked about, but they also added more detail on the proposed buffer. So there's actually a plan that comes along with this that they have supplied, and this is to address some of the concerns that were raised during the appeal. So for example, the buffer along the property to the north, they've actually widened to 8.5 meters, and it's proposed to be infilled with vegetation. So there'd be a planting requirement there, and we'll talk about that with the recommended conditions. But also here, there would be a concrete wall with this property line because they're the closest affected property. And that concrete wall would act as a sound buffer. And we have a picture of what they're proposing to do with that. Also, there's a buffer left with the coast. Now, there isn't a setback requirement here other than just a general property line buffer of 5 meters. But they have left more than 5 meters here, and there'd be some requirements to maintain vegetation in the areas for growing and planting of trees. So yeah, basically the buffer is enhanced from what you would have seen in October of 2022, and more details provided. Also, I should mention here as well, some of the exterior facilities like the mechanical equipment, it's enclosed in sound transmission class 55 or greater, ICF, and doors on there of 37 STC rating. And our building inspectors are able to evaluate STC ratings under the National Building Code. All right. I can't go into all the details of the applicant supplied because it's quite lengthy in terms of their response to some of the issues that the appeal board had. But it was all in the package, and so this is what is being shown here. But this is details on their buffer design. They have a link to the image of the proposed wall. So if you click to that link, that's what you would have seen in terms of a design. So a residential style concrete wall, so aesthetically pleasing. This is their point-by-point summary of their responses with concerns related to the noise from refrigerated trailers, their response to odor and mitigation of odor, their response to general concerns around noise, their response to concerns regarding pollution in the discharge from the tanks, and their response on the buffer requirements, which they address more fully in that other slide. This was just a little summary they supply with their application around the ongoing economic impact assessment post-construction. So a little bit of detail there on what they're estimating. Here's a rendering that is what is largely described as their concept proposal. Now it says preliminary, not for construction. These details would have to be more thoroughly investigated once they actually apply for a building permit. But we would recommend conditions around the aesthetics if this application were approved to make sure that it complies with rural plan objectives. But yeah, you'd have to have a more detailed application for a building permit than this. But this gives you the general concept of how they would have a 7,000 square foot facility with 2 holding tanks and how it would fit on the lot. So this is a fairly typical lobster holding facility. So you can see it's a sloped roof. All right, so let's talk about the objectives of the rural plan. So the objectives of the rural plan are, they're broad, and they're trying to achieve a number of things. So the first one is to preserve the area's rural character and lifestyle. And these ones I'm citing because they're of interest to residents and also to the development in question. So there's more than just this, but these ones are salient. C, to preserve the area's aesthetic beauty for both residents and tourists. F, to improve the water quality of Shamcook Harbor, McCann Cove, Birch Cove, and St. Croix River areas as to encourage fishing, aquaculture, and clam harvesting. K, to encourage the development of non-polluting light industrial uses within the area. So I made a couple notes on here that fishing and non-polluting light industrial uses are encouraged, as well as preserving character, lifestyles, and aesthetic beauty. So these things have to be balanced. Development may be encouraged, but only where conditions are established to ensure the development does not undermine the environment, water quality of Shamcook Harbor, and the area's rural character and lifestyle and aesthetics. So preserving character, lifestyles, aesthetics, this is discretionary to the PAC, and that's why these are necessary subjective decisions. Environment and water quality are protected through accepted pollution control standards. So we can actually cite things which would be required if the development was approved. So the policies of the Shamcook Rural Plan. So I'm going to just talk about 2 of them that are salient and then give a note on each one. So A, residential uses. It's a policy to discourage the intrusion of incompatible uses into established residential areas. And C, industrial uses. It is proposed to only consider light industrial use that is non-polluting and non-harmful to the environment. So my note on this. When I look at the guideline for the development of rural plans, it states a policy is a statement of intent. It is binding on the minister, not individuals, and it guides the framing of any subsequent proposal or zoning provision. So that means when the plan was drafted, it was deemed by the minister that non-polluting, non-harmful light industrial uses may be developed in a compatible manner alongside residential uses, as both are permitted by right in the same zone. Now let's go to the definition of the light industrial use. So light industrial use means the use of land, building, structures for the making of finished products or parts, usually from already prepared materials, including processing, fabrication, assembly, treatment, packaging, storage, sales, and distribution of such products or parts, but excluding conventional industrial uses and not resulting in the emission of odors, fumes, noise, cinder, vibrations, heat, glare, or electrical interferences. There's also the statements of public interest regulation, which must be considered in this application. I'll just read some salient points here. With respect to agriculture, fisheries, and aquaculture, it is a public interest and public priority to promote the agriculture, fishery, and aquaculture sectors and the production of food in the province. The following policies are established with respect to agriculture, fisheries, and aquaculture. B, identify current and future areas for fishery use and aquaculture use and prioritize them for those uses and other compatible uses. And C, consider setbacks, including reciprocal setbacks, if appropriate, between areas with an agricultural use, fishery use, or aquaculture use, and areas used for incompatible purposes. So the planner's note here is that this regulation came into effect in October 2023, and it prevails over local plans if they conflict. The intent of the regulation was to ensure that fishery uses have access to coastal areas. And the PEC has to consider these in the long-term impact for all development types in coastal areas and to balance the interests of year-round and seasonal residents with industry. PEC may consider the development subject to standards or conditions on its approval to help avoid, minimize, or mitigate potential land use conflicts. All right, so going into the discussion. The PEC has a mandate to revisit the decision that PRAC made in 2022, and it may affirm, revoke, or vary that original decision. The guideline for applications on similar to or compatible with uses states the PEC should give consideration to determining that the proposed use of land, buildings, or structures does not compromise the intent of the permitted uses to such a degree as to be considered being outside the purpose of the zone. So this is where that discretionary part comes in. The rural plan does not consider a lobster holding facility as part of an agriculture use, but it's important to draw attention to the fact that agriculture uses are permitted within this zone as well. Agriculture use in the rural zone includes the growing, raising, preparation, processing of livestock, including pigs, cattle, poultry, etc. The rural plan does not require agriculture uses in this zone to be specifically non-polluting, but it does promote general watershed protection and organic practices. And agriculture use has potential for noise, odor, and other impacts in the rural zone, and the PEC must consider that the general rural resource developments are within the purpose of this zone, which also hosts established residential areas. The purpose of the rural zone, therefore, is not to protect a single-use residential character at the expense of all other reasonable impact rural resource uses. The applicant's proposal for lobster holding, however, does not involve raising, growing, preparing, or processing seafood, but rather the warehousing and distribution of living animals, albeit dormant, as products. So it's the opinion of planning staff that the closest analog for a lobster holding facility is still a non-polluting light industrial use. The definition includes packaging, storage, and distribution of products. The proposal is to have live lobsters stored, packaged, and distributed from this facility. The definition clearly excludes heavy industrial uses or conventional industrial uses that commonly result in odors, fumes, noise, cinders, vibration, heat, glare, or electrical interference. Trucking is incidental to light industrial uses, such as warehouses. They are required for the distribution of products using trucks with internal combustion engines. Freight trucks do cause certain noises, vibrations, and fumes. So it is obvious that the intent of the non-polluting clause in this use in the rural plan was not meant to be taken so broadly as to render the permitted use altogether meaningless. PEC may decide that the proposed use lobster holding facility generates pollution that rises to the category of heavy industrial, or something else which has a greater impact beyond the purpose of the rural zone. And again, this is where PEC's discretion comes in. if the applicant's proposal involved constructing a facility for the packaging, warehousing, and distributing of inert frozen food products, there would be no requirement for a variance application, and the development application would have to be granted by staff upon compliance with the rural plan, including section 313. And that section is about there being a 5-meter buffer, and that would be non-polluting. Where this is a variance application, PEC has the opportunity to establish additional terms and conditions. The terms and conditions can be reasonable standards in order to balance the interests of year-round and seasonal residents with the fishery industry and be used to help avoid, minimize, or mitigate potential land use conflicts between these uses. These conditions may include standards for aesthetics, lighting, sound barriers, buffers, and setbacks. So this variance request is made under Section 55(1) of the Community Planning Act, and this is the section that deals with variances to use similar to or sufficiently similar to or compatible with a use permitted in the bylaw for the zone in which the land or building is situated. It is therefore recommended that the PEC of the Town of St. Andrews approve the variance by considering the lobster holding facility as proposed by St. Mary's First Nation on the subject lot to be similar to or compatible with a light industrial use, a permitted use in the rural zone, and varying the October 2022 PRAC decision by subjecting it to the following terms and conditions. 1, that a copy of the EIA approval or EIA exemption from the Department of Environment and Local Government for the proposed volume of saltwater consumption shall be provided to the development officer prior to building permit issuance. 2, that a copy of the license of occupation from the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development for the saltwater discharge pipe shall be provided to the development officer prior to building permit issuance. 3, that the arrangement of buildings and structures, mechanical systems, parking, and loading areas be developed in general conformity with the information submitted with the application. 4, that prior to the final building inspection by the building inspector, a 5 to 8 meter wide treed buffer and residential style 3 meter tall concrete wall with a sound transmission class rating of 37 or greater be installed and completed according to the buffer design and site plan submitted with the variance application. 5, that other than the access points or the buffers referred to in the previous condition, a 5 meter naturally vegetated buffer is developed along other property lines and along the top of the bank, and that this buffer area be preserved for the planting, growth, and maintenance of trees. 6, that prior to the final building inspection, the facility's exterior mechanical equipment be enclosed in solid structures with an SDC of 55 or greater, with access doors of SDC of 37 or greater to the satisfaction of the building inspector. 7, that no heavy industrial uses or other industrial processing of fish, aquaculture, or slaughter of live species may occur on the subject lot without a zoning bylaw amendment approved by the council of the Town of St. Andrews. 8, that prior to the final building inspection, the facility's exterior siding be clad with either traditional building materials, such as cedar shakes, wooden facsimiles, masonry, or be clad with metal material painted with a bright primary color. 9, that prior to the final building inspection, any exterior lighting is shielded and directed downwards and not directed at any neighboring property or into Shamcook Harbor to the satisfaction of the development officer. 10, that all dead animal waste shall be stored and sealed in odor-proof containers inside the facility or in a refrigerated trailer on site before being disposed at the regional landfill. 11, that no loading or offloading of lobsters, equipment, or other products shall occur between the hours of 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. 12, that all of the requirements of the Shamcook Planning Area Rural Plan and all environmental, provincial, and federal acts or regulations are complied with. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Henderson. Over to the committee if we have any questions on the planning report. Kevin?
Alex, in talking about the STC 55 or better and the doors, the STC 37 or better. So these, I'm assuming this will be for the cooling reefers and so on. So they will be enclosed inside of a building itself so that no noise will come from those while it's chilling the water inside. Is that what we're talking about when we're talking about the walls and the doors?
Through you, Madam Chair. So yeah, it's the proposal is to have these exterior mechanical equipments in walls. So that's like it's not a building itself. It needs to have air access, but to have walls that have the, yes, so 55 or greater for the walls made of 8-inch ICF, and to have doors with an STC rating of 37. So there's access, they need to have access doors to the mechanical equipment. But they can have a walls on 3 sides that would provide that sound mitigation. So yeah, where you could have problems with these facilities, where there has been problems in the past along this coast, is where these facilities are developed with no sound mitigation. So this is one of these best practices, which we've recommended in other instances where these things are approved with conditions.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, Councillor Harland.
Thanks, Alex. Oh, can you hear me okay? So a saltwater well would have to be drilled on site, correct? And typically, how much water, salt water, is required to run a lobster holding facility?
So through you, Madam Chair. So there's a couple ways these types of facilities can operate. So one would be to do an intake pipe as well as the outtake pipe. Both would require approval through the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development. What the applicant has proposed is to do a saltwater well, but there would still be investigations required in order to determine the volumes that they could get. And so that's one of the aspects of the proposal, I believe, that would be best answered by the applicant in terms of what they're proposing to do. Now, it's not, saltwater well itself is not something which is subject to a building permit or not necessarily regulated by the Shamcook Area Rural Plan Regulation. So they'd be subject to other acts, specifically environmental impact assessment regulation. So that's something which we either need to see the EIA or we need to see that they're exempted from an EIA. And I would leave it to the other department to answer the specifics about where and how much and how it's going to be addressed. But there is licensing regimes for both an intake pipe or a well with that level of consumption, but both are which are approved by a higher level of government with the Department of Environment, Local Government, or also the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development.
Yes. So just in looking at some of the other lobster holding facilities and what they've talked about in terms of the water that's required, the salt water. I mean, it's for 100,000 lobsters, it's like half an Olympic swimming pool. That's a lot of water that would be drawn, salt water that would be drawn from the area. Is there a chance that that could affect the wells in the area?
Yeah, and so that's why it'd be subject to an EIA, because what you don't want to have a situation where the draw is above that threshold, and then it could affect neighboring wells, in which case that would be something which the EIA would have to either approve or deny if they couldn't meet certain requirements around the EIA. So again, that would be something which, if they did have that level of draw, they're going to have to deal with the Department of Environment and Local Government around that in particular.
No. Anyone else from the committee? I have a question for Alex.
So my question is about the effluent. So that would get discharged into Shamcook Harbor, correct?
That's correct.
And prior to approval of the facility, would a full EIA have to be done with regard to what would be going into Shamcook Harbor? The concern I have is that there's a very active clam bed just down from this property. And Shamrock Harbor doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't flush out. Like it's, like it does on the other side of the bay in Bayside. So what are the concerns regarding the effluent going into Shamrock Harbor?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so what it is there's no EIA approval required for the lobster holding facility itself. Now, the applicant addresses some of this, and maybe it's best left to the applicant respond some of the details on the filtration system that they use. But what I typically am seeing across the region with these things is that sand filters are adequate and accepted as a pollution control measure because they're not feeding the lobster. If you were in a situation where you start feeding the fish, like if you were dealing with the, I know there's a facility in the Port of Bayside where they had to go through an EIA approval for the facility itself. It's a salmon grow facility. And they had filtration systems to deal with the fact that they're feeding the salmon to grow them out. If you're not feeding the animals and it's a passing through, it's a very dormant system in terms of like what kind of waste is generated. So typically the sand filters are mainly to catch things like the rubber bands that the fishermen use on the claws. If they come off in the tanks, they don't want that going out into the bay. So sand filter is adequate to treat that and to prevent that kind of thing going into the bay. So you're not seeing EIA approvals on the lobster holding facilities themselves because it's considered a cleaner discharge than what you'd have if it was an aquaculture facility growing animals.
Absolutely.
But what about, I'm assuming, and this might be a question for the applicant, but I'm assuming that the holding tanks would have to be cleaned. So with respect to the kind of chemicals that would be used to clean those tanks, those would be also flushed out, correct?
Yeah, and you'd best ask the applicant in terms of how they would deal with that and where that kind of cleaning solution, what kind of, I don't have details on that. So if that's disposed of through their septic system or I'm not sure, but that is a good question to ask the applicant.
Thanks.
Alex, I just have one more question. And I know we had a lot of reading here, but was there ever a traffic study done by DOT about the increase in traffic on the road, vehicles and so on? Like it's a question, right? Like, I mean, it's part of the process, right?
Yeah, no, there hasn't been a traffic study that's been raised to my attention. Now, we have seen these types of applications be subject to traffic study. There was just one done in Back Bay, and the PRAC was the authority having jurisdiction there, and they asked for a traffic study to be done. Now, it's not something I would recommend because it's not something in the purview of the local government's control when it comes to road control by DTI. Now, again, you go back to this, it's listed as a publicly maintained road. They have every intent to maintain it. It isn't, as you know, it's not currently in the best condition, but that's its current condition. So they would have to look at their approval with DTI, and that's going to be something that's going to be on the applicant to obtain an approval with them to access on a different driveway with a different culvert. So DTI still has the power to also set weight restrictions as well. So if there isn't adequate access to the site due to the condition of the road, they're able to set weight restrictions. So it's something which, again, as much as we would like to deal with issues around traffic, there's very limited that it might be good information for you to see, but again, when it comes to setting conditions, you can't say to DTI to do this or that or so, because they're completely independent from the local government and from this planning process. So we are looking at the zoning particularly and the rural plan and the issues with the law and the development itself. So traffic study may be something you want to see, but again, I don't necessarily recommend it because once you get it, there's not much you can do with that information.
Yeah, then what? Yeah. All right. Anyone else from the committee? All right, if not, I would like to invite the applicant up if they have any, sorry, I'm sorry. Did you have something more? No? Okay, all right, good, good, good. We just want to make sure. Right, I'll go ahead and invite the applicant up then if you want to make a presentation.
So Madam Chair, you'll be represented here tonight from the St. Mary's First Nations of Adrian Desbarats, Jeremy Paul, Rick Doucette, and their legal Jennifer Ingram.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for having us.
Is the
Um,
microphone on up there? Green light on the base?
It's on, yep, it's on. Just want to clarify something. There's already an existing saltwater well on the property. Been there for 20+ years. We've had it tested and serviced by Frac Flow. They're like a higher hydro logical firm that tests and does saltwater wells, freshwater wells, etc. I'm going to turn the technical stuff over to my technical expert as part of my team, Adrian Debra, who's joined us here virtually. He can answer any of the technical questions that anybody has for him. So turn over to you.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeremy, for the intro. Thanks, Alex, for a great overview of the project. That was really nicely done. Just to give everybody, especially on the committee there, a little bit of background about myself. I'm a marine biologist. I've worked for over 30 years in the fisheries and in the aquaculture sector as well. And I worked actually for 6 years with Clearwater Lobster as their senior biologist, staff biologist, and then later as a senior biologist. And after I left Clearwater, I worked as a consultant in the live lobster industry. So I've been in a lot of live lobster holding systems, and I've also helped to design and retrofit a few as well. So they asked me to be involved in this project to help them develop the design for this particular application, and also to help them with the variance application and so on. Just a little bit about myself. So to answer a few of the questions that came up there from the committee regarding water supply, that's Jeremy is correct. It was Frac Flow that did some what they call drawdown tests on the existing saltwater well that's out there. That site had once been a sea urchin and clam harvesting operation at one point in time, and so that saltwater well still exists. It's a 6-inch well, and Frac Flow did the drawdown tests, and they determined that well could safely draw in the range of 300 liters per minute. It's not our intent to draw 300 liters per minute from it. We don't require that much water for the application. Actually, the amount of water that we require to maintain 80,000 pounds of lobster is 20 gallons per minute. It's a very small amount of water. That's 75 liters per minute, roughly. So that would be expected to be well within the drawdown capacity of the well, but certainly Alex is quite correct. That does exceed the 7.6 gallon per minute threshold, so it would certainly have to fall under an EIA to determine that, and obviously we would go through that process. It's not clear yet whether we would develop that into a saltwater well, or whether we would go the more conventional route and install a pipeline to draw the water from the sea. That is yet to be determined, but the saltwater well certainly is a possibility for St. Mary's First Nation. Regarding the effluent, the amount of solid discharge from this application is very low. It's really difficult to get actual data regarding the amount of fecal solids that would be excreted by an unfed lobster held at 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, because the research just doesn't really exist. But the one article that I was able to find it's called "Organic Matter Production of American Lobsters During Impoundment in Maine," and it's by Tulstey and Carolina Preisner, 2005. And they fed lobster for under different frequencies daily, as well as once a day, as well as 2 to 3 times a day. Just determine the different levels of fecal excretion. This work was done at different temperature regimes. 15 degrees Celsius was the temperature regime that I used to do some approximations of the amount of fecal matter that might be excreted from this application. And according to their data, they found 1.8 by times 10 to the minus 5 grams of dry weight solids excreted per gram of wet weight lobster. It's a very small amount of fecal matter excretion. And you have to understand as well, as Alex had noted, these lobsters are not fed. So any fecal matter that they would be excreting would be coming from whatever is in their gut and intestines at the time that they're caught. Once they go into the system, then they would clear their gut, and that typically takes a few days to a week. At that point, their stomach and their intestines are completely empty, and they would not be excreting anything at that point, other than perhaps pseudo feces, which are just fecal casts with no organic material in them. They would be empty. So if you use the data from this study and you assume that the any lobster caught would be excreting at that rate for 7 days at a maximum, we're looking at a total of around 7 kilograms of solids discharge per month. Very, very small amount of solid discharge. The other thing too that I would like to note is that you have to, as a marine biologist, I recognize that inputs, everything pollutes, and the organic and the nutrient inputs into an ecosystem have to be weighed against all of the organic and nutrient inputs that are going into that ecosystem already, both the man-made inputs as well as the natural inputs, like from watersheds, as an example. Man-made inputs would be a good example of that. Would be probably one of the biggest inputs into the Passamaquoddy Bay would probably be the St. Andrews Municipal Wastewater Treatment System. I looked up the numbers for that. That discharge is around 2.5 million liters of water per day, and according to the data that I was able to find, approximately 8 milligram per liter of TSS discharge per liter of water. And that works out to around 600 kilograms of solid waste discharged into the Passamaquoddy per month. This application is looking at probably less than 7 kilograms of solids per month, and in many cases, much less than that, because I'm being very conservative with my estimate. So you can see that it's a very small number compared to when you put it in context with other applications. So I think on the effluent side, like I said, it's very low impact. Regarding cleaning agents, that was another question that was asked. My recommendations to my clients is just simply use fresh water. You don't need any fancy cleaning agents. These are very low, they're low biological load systems. You don't have to worry about bacteria. You don't have to worry about protozoans and that kind of stuff, providing that you're keeping the system clean. You're cleaning out the system on a regular basis, and I would encourage them to do that every year. Go in, give that system a good freshwater cleaning with a pressure washer, and you're done. And then you just let it air dry, and then let the air drying do the disinfecting for you, and then you're ready to get up and running in the next season. So that would be the recommendation that I would provide to St. Mary's. Just use fresh water and air drying. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Does anyone from the committee have any questions from the presenter? For the presenter? Yes, Jeremiah.
Whereabouts the lobster going to be coming from? Are they strictly local lobster?
Yeah, they're local lobster. I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, there's 7 boats, and 3 of those boats would actually be fishing in the Passamaquoddy Bay. So some of those lobster are coming from the Passamaquoddy Bay, and they're putting their feces back into the Passamaquoddy Bay.
Thinking about your discharge water back into the bay, are you going to have any control points for testing for disease? And also, another question is, what is your action plan if or when you discover that lobsters have a disease?
Well, we can certainly put an action plan in place for something like that. The only diseases that I am aware of that lobster have gotten in the past in my 30+ years working with live lobster are gaffkemia, Vibrio, and celiac disease. Gaffkemia is, I haven't seen a case of gaffkemia in 30 years. Vibrio is a cold water disease. You do get that from time to time. It's a slow moving disease. It's not, it doesn't impact the human, it's not a human consumption risk. So the animal can still be sold, and it is a slow moving disease. So you do have time to move your product. Celiac disease is a bit of a faster moving disease. That's typically, I've never seen a case of celiac disease where it started in the pound. It typically comes in with the product. What I encourage my clients to do is you always do disease screening on your product coming in. And if your product is clean coming in, then your product's going to be clean going out. And that's what I would certainly recommend with St. Mary's First Nation is have a good quality control program where you are looking for celiac disease and you're also looking for Vibrio. Those are the two diseases that would be of largest concern. Not that I consider them to be like high concern. They're very rare when they occur, but they can happen and you have to be prepared for them. As far as moving the product, if you had celiac disease, again, like you would have time. Probably the best case in the case of celiac disease is you would probably have to go to a cooker in that case to be able to stay ahead of it. Like sell to a canner.
Thank you.
Yes. Counselor Holland.
So just to follow up on that, so it may be a rare occurrence, but if lobsters were to come into the holding facility with disease, then I'm assuming fresh water won't be enough to clean the tanks. So in that case, how would the tanks be cleaned?
No, fresh water and air drying are the best ways to disinfect the system. They're far better than chlorine.
Okay. And can I ask one?
Yes,
Another question?
as much as you want.
So, in some of the other holding facilities, I looked at a few in Nova Scotia and in PEI. When the lobsters come in, they go into a purge tank, what they call a purge tank for 72 hours. Is that the case here? Would that be the case here? It does in the, in the plan, it does talk about sorting the lobsters, but I don't know, I didn't know if there was a place to hold the lobsters before they go into the chiller. If that's what it's
No,
called.
yeah, so what's your concern with the, like, do you think that the purge tank is held at a different temperature than the rest of the system? Is that what you're?
I wanted to clarify whether or not there was a purge tank.
So no, in short, no, not really. Like that, there are two systems in there. One side would be used as a temporary storage of product. So product in a crate on one side of the system. And then on the other side, you would have your long-term storage.
Okay.
So the product would come in a crate. At that point, it would be held possibly for 24 to 48 hours. So you could, you could call that purging, but the system water is not on flow through, it's on reuse. The system is actually 96, 97% reuse. You have 1,600 gallons a minute going around in a circle and 20 gallons per minute coming in fresh water, fresh seawater, that is.
Okay. So you talked about the bringing the lobsters in from 7 boats that are fishing in the Peskotomouhkati Bay. Are they all from LFA 38 or 37?
Better question for you, Jeremy.
So LFA 36.
36. The local area. Okay. So in terms of one of the conditions that the planners are recommending for this variance application is that nothing gets offloaded before 7 in the morning and it stops by 8 o'clock at night. Would that be a problem? How would that work? Because I know lobster fishermen's usually,
Folks that go from 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. to limit interaction with the school bus, mailman, etc. But we'll abide by any conditions we have to make it work.
Madam Chair, if there's any response, can you please come up to the podium so everyone on Zoom can hear you as well? If you could please repeat that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, my apologies. So we have 7 lobster boats, 3 of which fish right in Peskotomouhkati Bay. All 7 are within LFA 36. What was the question, committee
so I
member?
was just concerned about the timing. So the
Oh,
planners
yes.
are recommending 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yes, originally we had proposed before any decision was made in October of 2022 that we would only truck after hours from 8 p.m. till I think it was 8 to 8 or 7 to 7 to avoid conflict with school buses, mailman, any sort of services.
Mhm.
But if the recommendation is to do the opposite, then we'll work with that. So
Okay. And so when the lobsters come in to the facility, they may be held in I'm just trying to get a sense of how this would work. So they may be held in these crates
correct.
and then sorted and graded. I think that's what the
Yeah, and
proposal,
appropriate sizes or,
right. And then they are put into the the chillers or the facility.
Trays,
holding
Okay.
segregated
The whole
trays.
trays. And how many people would be working during that period of time to get all of that done?
depends on the season, but it could be 4 to 5 people. It could be 6 or 8 people
Okay.
in the facility. Slow time, it could be 2 people in the facility. Just depends.
And then how long would the lobsters be held in the facility before they are then trucked to market?
Could be daily, could be weekly, could be up to a month after the season, depending on the price and the demand.
Yeah, I can share.
Ideally, not more than a month, ideally.
Okay, thanks.
I can share a table if I'm able to share my screen.
Adrian, the share screen is available and ready to go for you.
Okay. So just to speak to what Jeremy was talking about with respect to, sorry, I'm being clumsy here. Share that. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so just speaking a little bit more to the sort of like how long the product would be held for. This data here is, and I do note up here, like this was for estimating truck traffic, but it's also pertinent to what Jeremy was talking about with respect to the amount of product when it's landed, and also to provide to the committee a little bit of an understanding of how the product is sort of going to move around. And this is an estimate. It's probably within an order of magnitude of accuracy. It's not going to be 100%, but I'm hopeful that it'll give you a sense of things. These are actual landings that were landed last fiscal year. And that's what we were using for our projections. So we see here in November, that's their busiest month. They would land around 100, ish thousand pounds. And that's landed in 12 fishing days per month. And so that works out to around 9,000 pounds per fishing day. Some of that is going to go direct to the market, like Jeremy had just talked about. So it will just come in, might stay for a day or two at most, and then it'll go out to the market and it'll stay in a crate basically the whole time. We have, so we have in this case here, we would have like 12 truck trips for landing, 3 truck trips to send this product here to the market. So, in the range of maybe 15 truck trips on that road for the entire month of November. So it's less than one truck averaging a day. December landings dropped quite dramatically, fishing days as well. By the way, in November, they're landing on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. So they're not landing product every day of the week. That's another important thing to note here as well. So, you know, I could see this operation having landing days when they're landing product and there's a truck moving up the road to bring product from their boats to their facility. And then a different day, like landing would be on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then on Thursday and Friday, I could see them shipping this product, you know, out to local markets and such. So again, that truck traffic is going to kind of be spread out over. It's not all going to be happening all on one day, kind of thing. So in this particular case here, landings per day drop quite substantially. We've got more product going to market, you know, like roughly 6 days for landing, 1 day to the market, 7 truck traffic days roughly for December. January, and this is what Jeremy was talking to, we're not really shipping anything anywhere, just holding it. And in this particular case, you're holding it because you're waiting for the prices to obviously improve. And then, so now February, some product is moving out of the pound. And so there's some more truck activity. In March, there's some more product moving out of the pound. So there's some truck activity related to that. And then so on and so forth. April, again, it starts to pick up. May, June, and July, and then we're moving that product out that we've collected through April to July. It's going out to the market. So as Jeremy had alluded to, we're looking at 1 to 2 months of holding time, roughly.
Thanks. I have one more question for the applicants. And it's a difficult question because I know it requires you to look ahead in the future. But the lobster industry has been taking a hit. We aren't getting the number of lobsters. The lobster fishermen aren't getting the number of lobsters that they did even last year. So if that decline and the lobsters seem to be moving north and outside of this area. So what happens if that continues? What would be the decommissioning plan for this facility if you weren't able to get the kind of lobsters, the number of lobsters that you needed?
Yeah, very good point. And just for clarification, I'm a lobster harvester myself. I've fished lobster since 2001. Yeah, the industry is constantly changing. I've seen in my 23 years of being in industry, the cycle go up and down 3 times. So may come back up, may go back down. But we definitely plan on getting lobsters from outside of the area to keep the numbers up if we need to keep that 80,000 pound number. So future plans are to buy once we have the capacity to hold our own and move them. And if we need more, we absolutely already have some local guys on board to work with us. So, which 90% of the lobsters would still be 36. Some would come from other guys in 38 gram an N. So.
Thank you.
Yes. Jeremiah?
One more question. Looking at that graph that was just presented, very nice, thank you. In knowing the roads in Charlotte County, so from the end of February until the 1st of June, there's going to be an 80% weight restriction on that road, as well as many others. So that, are you saying even though March, you're going to move around 24,000 pounds of lobster, you're going to have twice as many, 3 times or 4 times as many trucks to be able to move that product?
Yeah, that's a good point. More loads, lighter loads, I guess. We don't really have any intention on having tractor trailers down there. I don't know how that got looped into our synopsis here, but it's gonna be mostly cube trucks, straight trucks. There won't be tractor trailers heading down the St. Andrews North Road.
So no tractor trailers.
We don't really have any need for it. really.
Okay. They're all gonna be van style.
That's the idea. I mean, the road's only so wide, like,
Okay, thank you.
Is anyone else from the committee? Oh, hello.
Just for clarification, that road is rated as a 43.5 road, meaning it's a standard road for all of that they have in New Brunswick. So it can handle tractor trailer traffic at 43,500 kilograms per truck. Now, Jeremy had alluded the fact that, there's going to be other companies that we could be buying from other fishermen sources, or there could be some others that are coming from other companies. Could be Grand Manan, could be Nova Scotia, that type of thing. So likelihood it could be in a straight truck, it could be in a cube van, or it could be coming in a tandem truck, that type of thing. So, okay.
Thank you. Going once? Any more questions? Going twice? No? All right. Well, at this point, we turn it over to the general public for their contributions and commentary at this point. I think it should come as no surprise that there's quite a bit of interest in people presenting tonight, which is fantastic. I just ask that you please keep your presentations to 10 minutes or less. You will get a fair warning if you approach that 10-minute mark. But once that 10-minute mark comes up, you will be asked to please relinquish the mic. So if you would be so kind as to formulate your comments accordingly. Mr. Knopper, did you want to call the first?
I would like to ask Brenda and Ken Waywood to please come to the podium.
I've got a PowerPoint presentation for you. We live at 31 St. Andrews North Road, which is the lot outlined in red here. We built our house in 1989. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is an aerial picture of shortly after we built our house, showing that there are in fact no other residences around us at this date. I have included the fact that our house has a footprint of approximately 1,800 square feet on a lot that's 1.6 acres inside. So for reference, the proponent is planning to put a building roughly 3 times that size, 7,000 square feet, on a lot that's 2/3 of the size of our lot. Next slide, please. This building here at the very bottom was on the applicant's property. It was demolished in around 2010, had various uses prior to its demolition, including a residence. Go to the next slide, please. I served on the Shamcook LSD for several terms during the 34 years that we've lived in Shamcook. And I was on the committee during the preparation of the rural plan, which was enacted in 2012 prior to the guidelines that Mr. Henderson mentioned that was enacted in 2017. And the quotes I use on these slides are from the rural plan and do discuss residential areas. I contend that our neighborhood is residential. We have clam digging, rockweed harvesting, scallop dragging, and lobster fishing in Shamcook Harbor. These are seasonal activities and do not interfere with the residential use of the area. The point is used during spring and fall for boat launching and sporadically for aquaculture-related boat repair and launching. Next slide, please. In the rural plan, it states that a building should be compatible, blends with or conforms to the surrounding environment. I contend that a 7,000 square foot building is not compatible with the buildings around us. And especially, as the planner suggested, that it be painted in a bright primary color. I'm not sure why that was there, but over the years, we now have neighbors on both sides of our lot, and the picture I showed you at the beginning has residences throughout the area now. The next slide, please. Buffering. The buffer zones that have been indicated in the plan are, I have a problem with the plan, your site plan, and you've included the L&B industrial site plan. The lot lines on those site plans do not agree. So my question is, where are the lot lines for these properties? To me, the bearings are different. There's two different sets of bearings depending on which lot you look at. And there are discrepancies in the lengths of those lot lines as indicated. Buffer areas are drawn and listed as trees, but they're not treed at this point in time. The area was cleared and there are bushes on the lot. Next slide, please. Given that the buffer areas are required, have these been included to ensure that the applicant is not using more than 35% of the lot, which is a requirement in the rural plan, that not be done? Next, please. This is the surrounding area, and as I say here, there are at least 5 home-based businesses in the area. None of these have a 7,000 square foot building. I just don't think that's a 7,000 square foot building is compatible with the surrounding area. And there will be loss of property values if this plan goes ahead. Last slide, please. Earlier, the town stated that they were going to be consolidating zoning for all wards, which will mean the Shamcook Rural Plan will no longer be in effect. And given this and the current opposition, I'm just asking that the committee hold this application until the new zoning is in process, is in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Waywood will speak now.
All right. Mr. Waywood.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee,
Welcome. Welcome.
ladies and gentlemen. Most of the presentations that you're going to hear tonight are going to talk about the negative impacts that this proposal would have on the residents in this area. I'd like to address why this proposal would be bad for St. Andrews. And I'll start by saying that there's overwhelming opposition to this proposal by the St. Andrews residents in this area. Lately, and you can see by just the makeup of the crowd tonight, that this concern and opposition goes further than just our area. And I would maintain that if there was a business proposal on Water Street that had this much opposition, it'd be a no-brainer for the town. It would be dead in the water. And the point here is that I think it would be bad for St. Andrews to approve this facility and disregard the concerns and the wishes of its residents. But it's going to be much more than this. If I could have the first slide. Oh, I guess it's there already. This is going to be a major headache for St. Andrews. There's 12 conditions that Alex went through regarding restrictions on the operation or setup of this facility. He's also mentioned that the PAC can have additional terms and conditions added. And probably after tonight, you're going to want at least 6 or 8 more of them. Now, failure to comply with any of these conditions is going to result in complaints. The town is going to have to determine if they have merit, and if they do, they're going to have to present corrective measures that have to be done by the operators. And they'll monitor compliance, and if there is non-compliance and this continues, they might have to consider the headaches and cost of legal action. Have the next slide, please. So let's be clear, this is going to be a long-term policing commitment. There could be changes in ownership, new owners, new problems, new headaches. This facility will deteriorate with time. I know this because I worked in facilities like this my whole career as a scientist at the biological station. Not one of the labs, the wet labs that I did my research in, exists today. They were all taken down because they deteriorated to the point where they were unsafe, or it was costing too much to maintain or fix them. And we were a research facility. We didn't have the added concerns about making a profit, the fishery going up and down, or even changes in regulations.
Mr. Waywood, one more minute. Right here,
I'm sorry, did I?
one more minute. You're 10 minutes.
Yes, well, we're going to try to get there. So there's minimal economic benefit to St. Andrews. That's going to be another presentation is going to go into that. Certainly, the residential development of the area will be halted, and that will decrease, or at least not increase the tax base. We talked about decreasing property values, and my wife has already said that it would be poor timing to even consider this before the rezoning exercise has been done. So, last slide, please. Alternative plan for the area. Well, the best thing that could happen is to let residential development continue as it has. This will increase the tax base with no headaches to St. Andrews. It will not disregard the concerns and wishes of the people in this area. And I am not saying that this proposal is without merit. What I'm saying is we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. This is just the wrong place for it. And I hope consideration would be given to the industrial park or some other area that wouldn't impact negatively on the residents of St. Andrews. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
I would like to please invite Gail Reed to the podium.
Hi, my name is Gail Reed, and I live at 39 St. Andrews North Road, which is the property directly adjacent to the property we're here to discuss this evening to the north. I included this slide to remind me to take a deep breath. I'm nervous up here, and also to say thank you to everyone for the time and energy that you've put into this already. I know this has been a really long process mixed in with local governance reform and amalgamation. I know there's a lot of time and energy that has gone into this, so thank you. Next slide, please. The reason that we're here. So because of the variance that was applied for to consider this property similar to and compatible with, we are here. This is this variance is for light industrial use, which is permitted in the rural zone. This is a rural zone. So really the reason we're here is to question, is this in fact light industrial? This question is difficult for many reasons, partly because in 2011, when the Shamcook Rural Plan was written, lobsters, as I've been told, were typically held below the high water line and not inside of facilities. So when this Shamcook Rural Plan was written, facilities like this did not exist in this area of New Brunswick. So what is being proposed here, we're trying to find a place to make it fit. We're trying to find a place in the Shamcook Rural Plan to make it fit. So we're talking about live species. This is why it doesn't just fit in the industrial zone without requiring a variance, to my understanding. The live species have different land use implications than what inert products would have. And although fisheries do occur in Shamcook Harbor, I would say that they are minimal in time and equipment, seasonal, and transitory. There's no building or altered traffic patterns that occur because of the fisheries activities that do occur there. I would also say that this particular facility land use implications include an extremely large footprint on a very small piece of land, as Brenda spoke to earlier, that they will alter the current transportation patterns as well as the road infrastructure. They have significant safety concerns, and there's potential for water and environmental pollution. So in the planning report, we looked at agriculture as a possible place to fit because there's live animals there. Unfortunately, you can have a cow, you can have 5 chickens. This is over 50,000 lobsters, so it doesn't fit. Also because in agriculture, you're raising, growing, and preparing or processing, but here you're warehousing and distributing a live species. So it doesn't fit here, so we're back to light industrial as the closest analog. That's the terminology that's used as closest analog. It doesn't mean that this is in fact light industrial. When we look at light industrial, it talks about the fact that it has to be non-polluting. Half of the terms and conditions that have been proposed here relate to pollution directly and attempting to mitigate that pollution. I'd like to point out that this is on top of the pollution that will occur from the people working there, as well as the traffic from the trucks that will be coming in and out. So the terms and conditions that are listed there to attempt to mitigate the pollution. But if in fact this is non-polluting, why do we have to mitigate the pollution? I don't know of any other properties in Shamcook that require a 3-meter high, 10-foot high concrete wall to surround them in order to mitigate the pollution that's found on that property. Slide, please. The property to the south was discussed. This is what it looks like current day. You can see straight across to Minister's Island and the Bar Road. Next slide, please. This is clearly an incompatible use in an established residential area. I merely made their building the same color as the rest of the buildings. This is from what was submitted in the package. That's what the 7,000 square foot facility will look like compared to all of the other houses in the area. So because we are talking about a live species, this live species requirement is to be kept alive while it's being held. Major thing here is water. I would like to bring up the protection of water supplies in the Shamcook Rural Plan. There really hasn't been any information given to us in terms of what the water requirements are. I know in my supplementary information that I submitted to the PAC, there is a letter from Bob Sweeney that talks about the fact that facilities do in fact need fresh water. I know that I live on a well and many of my neighboring properties live on a well. I have questions like if an adjacent property well experiences saltwater intrusion, who will pay for a replacement water source? What happens if our wells are compromised? I would say that in this instance, planning ahead is going to be better than coming from behind. So planning to know, where are these water sources coming from? What is the well capacity? What is the potential for saltwater intrusion? I've gone down the rabbit hole of learning about drilling salt, whether it's horizontal or vertical. I don't know enough to speak about it directly, but I would like those questions answered. In the new community planning statement of public interest regulations that came in effect in October of 2023, Mr. Henderson spoke to these, and he spoke to the fact that fisheries uses are supposed to be identified and prioritized. And I agree. I think that there is a need for identification of the right location for fisheries activities in this area. But I know that it has not been done yet. To my knowledge, there's no studies that have been done since the new planning, the community planning SPIs came into place. When you look really deep into the user guide, which is what I did this weekend, AA2 talks about that the local government and regional service commission may consider coastal and land-based aquaculture and fisheries activities that will require specific locations, infrastructure, and services. I would argue that this location is not the right location for this type of fishery activity. This is a picture of the current road outside of the newly proposed entranceway. As you can see, it's about maybe a 1.5 lane road. You cannot actually get to vehicles unless you're on the shoulder of the road safely past here. And the next slide, this is further up. So that's my property in the background there. This is where the current entrance is. You can see the quality of the road there. It may be listed as under current regulations as a standard road in New Brunswick, but the reality of the road in New Brunswick is this. This is a picture of the recycling truck from this week backing up in front of my house. There's nowhere safe for the recycling garbage truck or the plow to turn around. They have to back up to Moss Drive and then pull forward. And into the next slide, please. They go into this S-bend. Any of you who are from around here have driven this. This S-bend culminates in a blind hill, and right beside that blind hill is the public mailbox. So this is a very busy area. You can see from this picture of 2 vehicles of standard size, there's nowhere for pedestrians. That's my daughter and my dog to walk there. I hate to imagine what would happen should that recycling truck, garbage truck, or plow as it's reversing meet with one of these larger vehicles that are coming down the road. Again, it's better to plan ahead than to try to play catch up from behind. I think this new planning SPIs help us with guidance on how we should go forward with planning in this area, identifying where things are needed, and then planning for them to be there. This particular case is what I would consider rezoning by variance. So we're asking for a variance for something that is actually rezoning. This doesn't fit anywhere because it didn't exist when the plan was written. We have now been given these SPIs to give us guidance how to go forward with amalgamation and how to use our planning to make things fit where they should. This is a picture of the property. There is no 8.5 meter existing tree cover. The proposed fence that's going to go there has to be set back, I believe, for maintenance. And if that happens, it reduces the buffer zone. Sorry, go ahead. That's just to show you there's no trees. The next one, there's significant erosion that's happening along the shoreline, and there's nowhere in this plan talking about building a retaining wall to prevent that. So that 5 meter buffer will slowly wash out to the sea and will not be there, as we are hoping to act as a sound buffer. There is also a property line discrepancy. I discovered a new survey marker 6 feet onto my property. This is not what I bought my property based off of. It is what all of the site plans are based off of, but as of last week, it was not a newly registered survey. So that is another issue as well. So I ask that the PRAC please reject this variance that is really a rezoning by variance. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
I couldn't hear you. Chair, committee,
Sorry, Mr. Craig. Sorry, Mr. Craig.
Yeah, go ahead.
what I've got is just a question of process as to
It's-
how you got here. What's going on?
Mr. Craig, we have a list of those that are to speak. You are on the list, but it's not your time to speak. I will be announcing who gets to speak at what point.
Sorry
Mr.
about that.
Craig, you're actually near the very end because you're not within the polling area. So
Okay,
you
sorry
are
about
still,
that.
you will still
Somebody
be
give
given
me
your
some
time.
Wrong information, but when I
I was actually searching for our next speaker, which is Debbie Grant, but I do not see her currently on line here. So
All right, let's move down then.
okay, I'm going to ask for Lynn Kozak. Please come to the.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The St. Andrews North Road area is clearly a residential area, first established, excuse me, more than 30 years ago. Some seafood harvesting does take place, but water access is controlled by an adjacent property owner with locked gates. Use is minimal and seasonal. Clam digging and rockweed harvesting are the primary activities. Sailboats are frequently launched here, and many are moored in the harbor. The Shamcook Rural Plan's objective is to preserve the area's rural character and lifestyle. The proposed lobster holding facility is not compatible with this goal. The Shamcook Rural Plan clearly and repeatedly states that light industrial use must be non-polluting. The proposal introduces measures intended to mitigate pollution, but cannot address all threats. Whose responsibility will it be to enforce regulations? The proposed facility will use a tremendous amount of salt water. What studies have been undertaken to guarantee that there will be no saltwater intrusion in neighboring wells? Is there potential for the effluent to have an impact on Shamcook Harbor? Will the area be closed more frequently, impacting clam diggers? Increased traffic in this area is a serious concern for all residents of St. Andrews North Road, as well as the Harkness Road. These are both very narrow roads with deteriorating shoulders and already poor road conditions. I have comments that I'd like to pass on from a transportation engineer who is very familiar with the area. As background, St. Andrews North Road is currently a provincially owned and maintained rural public roadway. While the exact age of construction of the roadway is not known, there has been a roadway in this location for many decades. Over the past 30 years, the roadway has primarily served as a residential roadway, enabling public access to several year-round and seasonal residences. The traffic on the roadway is normally limited to local traffic and pedestrian usage, with the exception of occasional light commercial usage, clam digging and rockweed harvesting primarily. When reviewing the existing conditions of St. Andrews North Road to the proposed development, the following concerns were identified. The existing roadway is quite narrow and currently challenging in spots for two-way opposing traffic to move adjacent to each other without reducing speeds and moving towards the shoulder. With the nature and mix of vehicles that currently use St. Andrews North Road, the introduction of larger trucks and increased traffic volumes is not consistent with driver experiences or expectations for the classification of the roadway. St. Andrews North Road and even the Harkness Road is in poor condition, with the chip seal pavement structure exhibiting extensive alligator cracking and fatigue failure. Its current condition would not adequately support increased weight of truck traffic or the projected 3 to 4 trucks daily, assumed to be transport trucks based on the site plan provided in the background documents without further causing roadway damage and need for both short-term and long-term repair and maintenance. St. Andrews North Road is currently a dead-end road without a cul-de-sac or adequate space for vehicles to turn around. NBDTI snowplows and the garbage trucks must back up and either turn into private driveways or continue backwards more than 200 meters to Moss Drive to turn around. While the proposed development will permit larger vehicles to turn around on private property, there should be improvements made to enable proper space to turn around and eliminate the need for vehicles to back up to St. Andrews North Road. The portion of St. Andrews North Road near the property under discussion is narrower in cross-section, meaning width, than other sections of the roadway and is quite narrow for the provision of continuous two-way traffic. The gravel shoulders have long since been overgrown with vegetation and would not necessarily provide adequate space for vehicles to pull over to avoid oncoming vehicles along this narrow roadway. The narrowness of the roadway in this portion of St. Andrews North Road presents a potential safety concern for motorists when there are two opposing vehicles on the roadway. Will there be parking restrictions on St. Andrews North Road to help to minimize the concerns noted? The horizontal alignment of St. Andrews North Road has two very tight horizontal curves with approximate radii of 42 meters and 52 meters. Transport trucks coming and going from the proposed development will be challenged to make the turns without off-tracking into the adjacent lane. This is also compounded by the extensive vegetation that is currently present on the inside of each of these tight horizontal curves, as the vegetative growth obstructs and compromises drivers' stopping, sight distance, and decision sight distance. With the residential nature of the existing development and current use of the roadways by pedestrians, the increased traffic volumes and introduction of heavy vehicles introduces potential safety concerns for all users. It is recommended that further review and consideration of transportation and traffic operations relative to the existing roadway and public safety be considered when reviewing the application. And just a few more comments. I also understand, and according to information the town had provided previously, that there are no plans for either of those roads to be upgraded in the near future. The Shamcook Road Plan advocates liaison and collaboration of groups, organizations, and communities in the area. There has been no discussion of any sort. The Community Planning Act states one of variances from a zoning bylaw or subdivision bylaw. A variance is typically a minor variation from the set of rules a local government applies to land use and planning development, and similar to and compatible with. The goal is to ensure that development occurs in an appropriate place, and the objective to allow for the reasonable adjustment to zoning provisions where it is considered desirable for the development of land, building, and structures. And in the statement of public interest regulations, it states, following policies are established with respect to settlement patterns. Avoid development and land use patterns that may cause environmental or health or safety issues. The purpose of this policy is to balance the need for development in safe and appropriate ways.
Lynn, 1 minute.
Okay, it is less expensive to prevent or mitigate risk rather than reactively responding to disasters and the unintended consequences of unplanned development. Mr. Chris Spear at a recent council meeting spoke about complementary development. I believe what we are seeking in this area, the development be complementary and respectful of the existing character, lifestyle, and environment of our area, is gain worth the risk. The short, medium, and long-term implications must be considered. This is precedented setting for other parts of our community. Our responsibility as a community is stewardship and care of the land for current and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to my next speaker, which
Yes,
is Wendy
please.
Jones on the list, and then I'll go
Yep.
back to Ms. Grant.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Ms. Jones, you have your audio to the PAC. You have the floor. You have 10 minutes. Can you hear
Thank
us?
you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I do appreciate this opportunity to speak. I'm sorry I can't be in attendance, but I do appreciate it. And I really want to compliment all of the speakers that have gone forward. The presentations have been wonderful. I've learned a lot from the presentation. So I have had a lot of my questions answered, but there still are a lot more. So I did prepare some slides. I don't know if you can see them, but I'll just review them myself. So the number one question is pollution. We have looked at, pollution. We've had the scientists talk about pollution, and that's wonderful. However, there will be noise. And what I don't understand is that the filters and the air conditioners will be running, from my understanding, 24/7, 365 days a year. That's what I don't really understand. I know there's different hours in terms of transporting, but these filters are going to be very loud. I know that Mr. Paul mentioned in one of his applications that it's about the sound of a lawnmower or a chainsaw. And I know those comparisons can be made, but however, first of all, we're on a bay and sound carries greatly over a bay. So to have something running as a lawnmower or a chainsaw, and if it is 24/7, 365 days of the year, that is terribly damaging. The sound of the diesel trucks, I know they say that that is considered a given, but I don't believe it is. I don't believe that it's a given to have this kind of traffic on the road and the noise coming from these cube vans. And I know that they're very noisy and dangerous. So all the previous points I absolutely agree with, that the noise pollution will be very significant. And the sound of the diesel boats. Again, I wasn't even aware of how these will be transported either by truck or by diesel boat. So it sounds like it's going to be a combination of the two. But again, it just increases the noise and the pollution in the area. And not only does this affect the people, I mean, basically you're looking at dozens, if not hundreds of people in the various bays. Within that, there's 2 bays being affected by this. But it's also affecting the wildlife. There are beautiful families of bald eagles, heron, and deer that are in this area. And I do believe that the noise and the water pollution will greatly have a problem for these animals as well. And that's one of the reasons that people come to New Brunswick, live in New Brunswick, is for the beauty of nature. If we look at the water pollution, I know many of those questions have been answered. And I appreciate the science. I appreciate all that. However, I do believe there's going to be a smell. I know they're going to do their best to mitigate that, but I don't know how there can't be when you're transferring lobster, fish, any kind of material like that. There's going to be a smell on the hot days when it's, the wind is blowing. I just cannot see how that's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong, but anytime I've been around any kind of fishing experience, there's definitely smell. And again, this is going to be 7 days a week, to my understanding, 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, no vacation to that. I absolutely agree with my previous speakers on the fact that I do not consider this light industrial use. I understand the definition, but again, if it is working 24 hours a day to keep the lobsters at the correct temperature, how does that fit into light industrial? I actually checked with two other businesses just to check what their hours of operation were for. And there was one in St. Stephen called Classic Woodworking, and they work from 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. I looked at the Ghost Road Auto, and the same with them. They're also 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. So the hours listed for this variance are far and exceed what a light industrial would be. I don't believe that's a reasonable description of what it will be used for, intended use. In terms of economics, I just want to go over some numbers. These are not set in stone, but as I mentioned earlier, the lobster plant would affect dozens of homes in the area. New homes are being constructed continually. If you just look around, there's new homes being built all the time. Beautiful new homes that all fit in very nicely with the neighborhood. And these are large investments. Cost to build a new home is anywhere, again, round numbers, $400,000 to $1 million or over. And these investments go directly into the local contractors, electricians, landscapers. It's a continual investment. If a lobster plant goes in, there would be a significant loss in value. Residents, I guess, could apply for a reassessment of their properties, and we would hate to see that. Values could drop 20 to 30%. That would decrease several things. It would decrease the value of the home, it would decrease the sales volume, and it would also decrease the taxes coming in. I think that would be a horrible idea when there's going to be continually more homes being put in, millions of dollars being put in. So I have to look at the math in terms of what's being put in terms of residential versus what's being put into a lobster plant, which I do understand there needs to be a balance, but it has to look at the long-term value of it. And as well, my concern is with the roads. I do feel that they are not in good repair, and I think that has to be looked at. So I guess the bottom line is it seems like there still are a lot of questions, and a lot of these questions have been answered, but there's a lot more to be put forward and answered. And I think to have it approved would be very hasty, especially at the time where, this is new to St. Andrews. And I think that pushing forward to have this proposal go through would be not a very considerate idea. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
So I'll go to Miss Debbie Grant, which I'm assuming is the one with the hand up. So we'll first see where this goes.
Thank you very much.
Miss Grant, you have the floor to PAC. Can you unmute?
I have unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Miss Grant. You have 10 minutes on the clock, then it starts now.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and everybody in attendance. I'm speaking to you before everybody today, not just as a real estate agent, but as a concerned member of our vibrant community near St. Andrews North Road. I'm compelled to address the issue that has significant implications for the well-being of our neighborhood and the value of our homes. In the fall of 2022, we have become aware of the proposed construction project that could alter the very essence of our residential area, our cherished neighborhood, a lobster holding facility slated to be erected adjacent to our homes. Today, I express not only my deep concern, but the strong objection to this development. St. Andrews North has been long more than just a location. It's a symbol of peaceful waterfront living and the haven for higher property values. It is with a sense of responsibility that I share my professional opinion, believing that the introduction of a lobster holding facility in close proximity to all our residents could have a profoundly negative impact on our real estate values. The potential consequences of such facility are multifaceted. Firstly, the noise, as everybody's spoken about, the disturbances stemming from daily operations, including the constant hum of machinery and transportation of live lobster, threaten to shatter the tranquility of this that has defined our community in the past. The serenity that attracted us to this area, myself included, was the quiet, low traffic, able to walk the beaches and not have anything industrial around us, the destructive noise and activity disrupting our daily lives. Moreover, the proposed facility represents an industrial intrusion into our area predominantly designated for residential purposes. The incongruity not only undermines the aesthetic appeal of our neighborhood, but also raises concern about safety, increased truck traffic, congestion on our small rural roads, and potential hazards that we can just not ignore. When somebody sells a residential home in New Brunswick, we are to fill out a property disclosure statement. And this is something that is for each of the sellers and also for a potential buyer to review on the purchase and sale. And in clause number 10 in section G, the question is, are you aware of any public projects, real estate developments in your neighborhood? There's nobody now that in our area cannot answer no to that question. It does significantly have an impact on our sales for the future. As residents who have invested significantly in our homes, we must not stand by idly and allow this proposal to proceed unchecked. We implore those in decision-making positions to carefully consider the broader implications of such a development in our community and take the necessary actions to prevent its construction. In closing, a sincere gratitude for your attention to this matter. I trust that our concerns will be given the consideration they deserve, and we can preserve the character and the value of our homes in the Shamcook area and any other future development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Grant.
So our next speaker will be Juliet Aurora. So just give me one second. Juliet, if you could unmute yourself, you have the floor to the PAC. Can you hear us? I'll ask again, Juliet, can you hear us? Give you one last time, Juliet, can you hear us? Can you please speak? This time I'll move on to our next speaker. I can
Thank you.
always come back. There. So our next speaker will be Patrick and Holly Blaugrave. So just give me 1 second. Patrick, can you unmute yourself?
I believe I've done so. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You've got 10 minutes for PAC and your time starts now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for the incredibly informative and interesting presentations this evening. So my name is Patrick Blaugrave. My family and I own a seasonal property directly across Shamcook Harbor from the proposed facility. I'm an economist by training, and I guess by career choice and current profession too, but don't hold that against me. I speak to you tonight, though, primarily as a concerned resident. In my remarks, I will comment on the supposed economic benefit of the proposal. That's something that is contained as attachment E, document 5, in the documents which were circulated. At the outset, let me note that there's a distinct disadvantage from the perspective of a speaker here tonight in trying to raise evidence and quantify the things which many of us believe to be true. We, or I at least, simply do not have the time or the access to the necessary data to quantify much of what I'm about to say. Nevertheless, I hope that you'll bear with me as I make a few related points. Let me start by saying that the estimated economic benefit presented in the application is a relatively simplistic calculation only of the direct or first round impact of the facility on the local economy. And I'm sure that the developers would be more than happy to admit that point. From my side, without knowing more about the factors underpinning this calculation, which is of course summarized by a couple of paragraphs, it is impossible to say whether it is a sound calculation or not. So in that context, let me raise a couple of questions. First, if, as we've heard tonight, there are already 7 fishing boats which are producing lobsters in the area, then how does the construction of this facility result in an economic benefit? Those 7 boats are already producing lobsters. I don't know where they're held. I don't know where they're processed. I don't know anything of that nature. But in order for this facility to represent an actual economic benefit, then either this must be displacing activity that's currently taking place elsewhere in the province, presumably, or the plan must envision an expansion of operations. Because from a pure gross domestic product perspective, the production of those lobsters, whatever's coming off of those 7 boats, what was shown very nicely in the spreadsheet, that's already happening. And so the production of this facility, to my mind, at first pass, it's not clear how that represents an economic benefit. Next, even if you believe that there is an economic benefit, a first round economic benefit, the true economic impact of this project on the broader local economy has to take into effect potential negative second round or spillover effects. And these spillover effects, and we've heard about several of them already tonight, would tend to mute or perhaps even completely reverse any estimated first round positive economic impact. And this point is closely related to something that was said during this evening's initial presentation, which I liked very much, I have to say. Specifically, objectives A, C, and K of the Chamcook Rural Development Plan seem to have already been included precisely in a development plan because they recognize that economic and other damages must be avoided in considering development. And so I don't plan to dwell particularly on what are the possible second round impacts, because those have already been spelled out by Ms. Jones and Ms. Grant, among others. But I would contend that these include, but not be limited to, first and most obviously, a negative impact on surrounding property values, which would reduce property tax collections. That one's pretty straightforward. I don't think it's particularly contentious. Next, a reduced likelihood of new residential investment in the surrounding area. There are vacant lots, and there is, of course, the possibility that persons could further improve their homes, which would, of course, further improve property values, further improve tax collections. Also, and I think this is maybe one of the most important elements here, a variance of use in this case, it would seem to me, could have a broader impact beyond just the Chamcook community on development throughout the St. Andrews municipal area, particularly the coastal area, if concerns arise that similar facilities could be constructed in the future on other, currently exclusively residential coastal sites. Then there are the more obvious ones, but much harder to quantify. There are nuisance elements, which are spoken to here tonight. Noise, light, possible biological and marine elements, impediment to the enjoyment by residents of their properties. These are all very hard to quantify. That doesn't mean that they do not carry a dollar value for residents, because they do. Next, possible negative economic impact or negative impact on recreational activity and tourism. Minister's Island is right across the way. These are incredibly uncertain in magnitude, but they are clearly net negative. You could also, of course, have a negative impact on marine life and other water-based activities in Chamcook Harbor. I'm not in any position to quantify the risk of these, but they shouldn't be dismissed. And so really, the thing that I want to say in closing is that the first round economic benefit that's presented in the proposal is not the actual ultimate equilibrium economic impact. To get to that number, you have to net out the negatives, which I've listed in previous points, against the possible positive. You also have to be very careful that that first round positive effect, the supposed 2.8 million, which is based on $2 million worth of production and a multiplier of 0.4, that's how you get to 2.8, you have to make sure that that is not crowding out activity elsewhere. Because if it is crowding out activity elsewhere, then that first round impact is a huge overstatement in terms of the overall economic impact. Final thing I'm going to say, no matter where you settle on the quantification of the supposed first round economic benefit and all of these second round negative impacts, the one thing we can say for sure is that the construction of this facility will result in a transfer of economic well-being away from existing residents of the Chamcook Harbor area, due to all the items that I've listed and others have listed as well, and towards some combination of the developer and future employees and partners of the facility. And so as a current resident, obviously, you know, this is something that I'm very opposed to. In any event, I thank you all for your time this evening. That's it.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm gonna ask Miss Juliet Aurora to raise her hand. So I know which one's active. I saw two earlier. Yeah. Miss Aurora, can you hear us? Oh, there's the second one. Okay, thank you. Let's try this again. Miss Aurora, can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay,
You have
perfect.
10 minutes to speak with PAC and your time starts now.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to everyone on the committee for giving up your Monday evening. And I'm sure the many hours prior to this to review all the documentation. It's obviously a very important issue for all of us. So thank you for your time. Most of what I was going to say has already been covered, so I'm not going to take my full 10 minutes repeating the same concerns, and we'll try and be as brief as possible. The applicant referred to the area under question as being historically used for a similar purpose, the Canadian Sardine Company. However, that facility was in 1912, which is 112 years ago. If you were to drive through the area now, you would see that it is all residential and no industrial uses in place. Even the map that Mr. Henderson showed at the beginning of the meeting, where he was showing the area of notice that was given for the meeting, just within that 1 kilometer radius, it was evident how many residential homes would be impacted both on both sides of the bay. When the original application was submitted in 2022, it was suggested to us as residents that if we did not want a light industrial building to be placed there, we should have applied for a change in zoning for it to be residential. However, this was before amalgamation with the town of St. Andrews, and there was no residential option for zoning in Shamcook. This has also not been made available to us as an option after the amalgamation as it's progressing through its various stages. With the amalgamation in January of 2023 and St. Andrews Council announcing in August of 2023 that they would be reopening a zoning review, I believe that it's in the best interest of the town to wait for the completion of that consolidation zoning project to determine whether this property ID should in actuality now be deemed as residential. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.
Next, I would like to ask Dr. Julie Levesque Taylor to come to the podium. Thank you.
Hi, those who know me know that I can talk really, really fast. I'm going to take a bit more of a personal kind of approach. I 100% agree with all of my neighbors and all the points that have been made so far. I came here 3 years ago, and I can tell you that what Debbie Grant has said about property and how we view things and when we make decisions, as a dock that was sorely needed in this particular area, what brought me here were trees, ocean, and quiet. I'm on call today. I got up at 5 o'clock this morning and I was on call and I took care of patients. I didn't have a lunch. I'm exhausted. I finished my day at 6:15 p.m. I like to go home to my trees, my quiet, and my ocean so that I can take walks in the woods. I bought 2 lots, no little expense, 2 lots so that I had more trees and quiet and ocean. And that is why I live there. And that is why my neighbors live there. And that is the nature and the beauty of our properties. And to have, it's going to be noisy. It's going to be noisy. It's going to be beep, beep, beep backup trucks. And as much as they're going to try and mitigate that noise, if you can hear a chainsaw, we don't use our chainsaws on Sundays as our neighbor's policy. We like the quiet. And if I had to move here today, our original plan was to come here in 2025 when kid number 3 turned 18. If I was making that decision today and I wanted to buy a property from Gisela, I wouldn't come knowing that this was possibly going to happen. I'd be in Moncton, closer to my parents, and I'd have a cottage somewhere near, I don't know, Kapini or something. And I wouldn't have nearly the beautiful life that I have here. I have every intention of staying because of trees and ocean and quiet nature and the neighbors that believe in the same. That's all I had to say. Thank you. Oh, and my kids walk down that road, by the way, to get to the bus around that blind corner. And having trucks coming around the corner, dangerous. That road's not equipped for it at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next on our list is Miss Gisela Lindlau. If she can come to the podium, please.
Dear committee, my name is Gisela Lindlau. I'm a citizen of St. Andrews for 30 years, a full-time, is that okay? A full-time citizen. And I bought some retirement project, the area adjacent to the Lobster facility being built. And the three speakers before me were living on that area, and I have more properties for sale there. They are all of a larger size, and they are protected by covenants that people cannot do some activities. They cannot do larger businesses there, and they have to follow those rules. But now with that Lobster facility in front of me, those covenants I have and I ask them to follow are a joke. We are protecting our trees, as Julie just said, and I have a subdivision plan there for 13 properties, which was done 20 years ago, not by me, but by my predecessors. And I will incur a lot of financial damage if we have that reduction of use in a quiet way. What I see as well is that if we have this light industrial use, it will set a precedent for other areas and for the areas around me further. We should consider that St. Andrews is a peninsula. St. Andrews in the medium time can only grow for his building residential areas in one direction. And the St. Andrews North area is in the middle, middle range of time. The area you all need to build houses. I have the land there. I have that subdivision there and have 3 more potential subdivisions there, which will be protected as well to protect the environment first, to offer equality. And it's equality with wooded area, which we do not have in St. Andrews. I would sincerely ask to protect that chance for the future of St. Andrews that I can give or my successors will give in the medium range of time. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker will be Mr. Mike McCoy. I'm just going to ask him to mute.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Your 10 minutes starts now, Mr. McCoy.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just as a brief introduction, my roots in St. Andrews go back into the 1800s. So I'm very familiar with the area, and I want to see it protected for the benefit of the residents and the tourists and the people just want to enjoy the way of life down there. I agree with all the comments around the zoning and the industrial light industrial classification, and to me, I don't understand how something can be force fitted under that definition. Like this lobster holding facility, it clearly is a residential area. I know that in the past, the site was used, as was previously mentioned, over 100 years ago for a facility, and more recently it's been used for the inshore fishery and as a staging area, etc. I don't believe that the prior use of the area should be used in any way to justify the future use or the future zoning of that site. As far as the residential nature of the area, it's clearly spelled out in the Town of St. Andrews municipal plan of 2020, bylaw MP 20-01. and the objectives are clearly communicated around protecting the environment, enhancing quality of life, and that sort of thing. I won't repeat what some of the other presenters have gone over, but I would like to point out, if you take a look at that municipal plan, you only have to turn one page, and there is a lengthy quote by a citizen which captures the essence of the plan and talks about what St. Andrews is about. So I'm not going to read that, but I would encourage everyone in the room there, go grab the copy of the plan, take a look at that one quote. The last sentence in that quote is, "Our environment, St. Andrews, makes this a different place than anywhere else in the world." And we truly believe it. It's as the last lady had pointed out, or two ladies ago, it's the trees, it's the environment, it's the ocean, it's the quiet. And I think we need to preserve that. However, I would like to shift the nature of my comments to a different area completely that I do not feel have been adequately addressed in the application. There is little to no reference at all about construction activities below the water line. There is little to no reference to the ongoing operations and maintenance of the facility. I have submitted comments to the PAC with a host of questions, and I will read some of these questions, but I do not feel that they've been adequately addressed. My first question is, how will the offshore lines be installed? And I know that there may only be one line, but there could be two. There's a previous pier in the area. Will it be restored? Will it be dismantled? Where does the offshore line for the effluent terminate in the harbor? How will the quality of the effluent be monitored? Where does the effluent go? Has there been any plume modeling that has taken place to understand the flow of the effluent? As one of the other presenters has pointed out, once that water is in the harbor, because of the tides, I mean, a lot of that water just stays there forever. So we need to clearly understand the impact on the harbor of the effluent. What is the frequency of a facility turnaround and cleaning? I think we've covered that briefly, but there will be a discharge into the harbor at that point in time. Will there be operating and maintenance procedures in place? Will there be spill containment response plans in place, not only for the lobster tanks themselves, but there's going to be diesel storage and other chemicals being stored on site? What are the requirements for compliance and non-compliance monitoring, reporting and mitigation? Will baselines be established for groundwater monitoring? So previous presenters have talked about that, and there should be a concern about groundwater contamination. And then finally, the long-term impact on the bay. So without repeating what the other presenters, the ground the other presenters have covered, I too object to the installation of this lobster holding facility. Our property lies across the harbor, close to where Patrick's property is. And as everyone knows, sound, smells, odors, light travel very quickly on open water. I thank you for your time. I'd like the PAC to take my comments under consideration, and obviously I object to the installation of the facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Mr. Knopper, if you could. Just looking at the clock, we have this pesky little rule in our operating procedures that calls for our meetings to conclude after 2 hours. I look at the clock now, we're just a little bit over 2 hours, but I know we have 4 more presenters. So I was wondering if I could get agreement from the committee to continue to gather this input before we actually close for tonight. So if I could just get some indication from the committee, if you wanted to keep going.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are going to go through the presentations at the very least.
Okay.
Yep.
So next one I'd ask Ms. Beth Campbell and David Sullivan, if they are present here, to come to the podium. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Beth Campbell and my husband David Sullivan and I own what is currently lot 88-2 St. Andrews North Road, and where we are currently building a house. The proposed lobster holding facility would be 2 lots down from our home. I'd like to start by saying that I appreciate the time and thought that the applicants have put into revising their proposal and the improved clarity they have provided regarding the buffer and mitigation of noise, odor, and pollution discharge. I do still share, however, many of the concerns voiced tonight, but I would like to focus on the roads, and I apologize for repetition because the roads have been mentioned several times. And the reason I'd like to speak about them is because of the associated safety concerns I have for myself and other residents in the area. In the 12 years that we have owned our property on St. Andrews North Road, we have witnessed the residents of the Harkness and St. Andrews North Roads regularly strolling, walking their dogs, riding their bikes, and picking up their mail at the rural mailbox. We have also noted that the Harkness and St. Andrews North Roads are narrow, unlit, and have limited to no shoulders. They are also poorly maintained, covered in cracked, patchy macadam, have no lane markings, inadequate speed limit signage, blind hills, a sharp turn onto St. Andrews North Road, a hardened surface of icy packed snow in the winter, and a period of vehicle weight restriction during the spring thaw. Both roads are in bad shape, but the St. Andrews North Road is the worst of the two. It is narrower, 18 feet wide in front of our house. It has no shoulders, or they're not visible. And it is further challenged by a significant S-curve that is hard to see around and a blind hill right near the intersection with Bayview Boulevard, the school bus stop, and the rural mailbox. The proposed lobster holding facility would be located near the end of this road, so the truck traffic, and I don't know what the truck traffic is going to be. I can only go by what the proposal has, what the applicant has said in the documents given to us. So we were initially told that it would consist of 4 to 6 cube vans and 3 to 4 trucks daily. Trucks were not defined, but in our past hearings and so on, it was suggested that trucks would be tractor trailers. Again, it's been spoken of differently today, but not in the documentation. So in any case, significant trucks would be navigating these difficult road conditions. So, and we were led to believe this would be daily, 7 days a week, most of the year. As a resident of St. Andrews North Road, I had hoped to be able to safely walk to the mailbox, take a neighborhood stroll, or ride my e-bike into town. I do not believe that the regularity of the proposed level of trucking is viable or safe on the Harkness and St. Andrews North Roads. Now, there is no specific mention of a lobster holding facility being permitted use in the Shamrock Rural Plan, which is why we're having this meeting today. There is also no mention of minimum road conditions to support the level of trucking such a facility requires in what is predominantly and significantly a residential area, but that does not mean that road conditions and safety should not be considered. I do not see how this proposed lobster holding facility can, in good conscience, be approved without first improving the roads so that travel to and from such a facility can be made safer for the local residents to engage in the normal activities of daily living. Failure to do so would abandon us to unnecessary risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Mr. Joe Gonclave, so I'm just going to ask him to unmute. Oh, he was here.
See him. Oh, okay.
He was here. We'll come back to him. At this point, I'd like to ask Ms. Jessie Davies to come to the podium.
Chairman, committee, I'll try to be brief. Some of the things that I had planned to mention have already been said. I'm a resident of St. Andrews, but not a resident of the area. I am retired. I was the Director of Environment and Sustainable Development at the University of New Brunswick. I participated in the municipal plan for St. Andrews, and I'm currently a member of the Environment Committee. You have heard that the rural plan in Chamcook states very clearly that the policy is to discourage incompatible use. And in any normal thinking, this is incompatible use. For one small building lot, I will call it, to impact negatively on so many other properties doesn't seem in the interest of our town. More than 65 residences were notified of this proposal. This acknowledges a huge potential impact. Even more properties will be impacted, as other speakers have mentioned, by the heavy truck traffic on a very narrow road, and I know that road well. And we will all pay for that. My husband and I moved to St. Andrews around 20 years ago, and we looked at the lot directly across from the proposed development. And my first reaction when I heard of this, frankly, and embarrassingly, was frankly very selfish. We were relieved we had chosen to build elsewhere. This development would have destroyed our enjoyment of our property, like other speakers. The peace, quiet, the ocean, and the natural environment are important. And it would have decreased the value of our property when it goes to our children. If this is, but it goes further than that. If this is approved, it's a very dangerous precedent for intrusions into other residential areas in our town. The property values in the area has been clearly pointed out by Deborah Grant that they will decrease, but this also decreases the property base for all residents of the town. It cannot be considered light industrial use, and just because the rural plan that is still in effect does not prohibit this specifically, it's quite a stretch to say that it is within the scope of the plan. There are appropriate locations. If this is a good project, it could be in the industrial park, as has been mentioned. But our waters are warming. We don't know how long we will have. This is unfortunate because we all love lobster, but this may not be a project that would be there for a long time. We don't see a decommissioning plan. We have just news just this last week reminding facilities that they have to euthanize egg-bearing females. This is something we have to really consider. Finally, if this is built, who will police the smell, the noise, the traffic, possible infestation of rats? Think of the experience of the Rishabakto residents. Now, I realize it's a different kind of facility, but they're rallying, trying to close down a facility which is very, very, there's a whole lot of smell. And their slogan is "Stop the Stink." I guess what we want to do is prevent the stink. Once an inappropriate development is allowed, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to right the wrong. So we respectfully ask you to reject this inappropriate proposal for this particular location and not grant a variance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I don't see Mr. Gonclaves on anymore, so we'll go to our last speaker, Mr. Michael Craig.
Once again. It should make Dwight very happy to know it was going to be a short presentation. Anyway, just curious as to why Chief Akagi wasn't brought into this process. Have you contacted him?
Through this process that was not part of
PAC process,
this
lead into it, whatever.
So the process, generally speaking, is a mail out to within the 1,000-meter radius of the property that is in question. Anybody can participate within the processes of PAC like you are right now. It is up to them beyond the 1,000-meter radius if they wish to participate or not. So the straight answer is no, the Chief Akagi was not directly contacted for comment unless Mr. Henderson has any further comment.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. No, we didn't contact the Peskotomouhkati First Nation in this application.
Thank you.
I just, when you come into your preamble here, you talk about unceded territory, and I would think that he's got a dog in the race, so just curious as to why he would not have been contacted. Anyway, that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes the list of registered speakers.
Okay, thank you very much. So, hello, yes. Absolutely, sure.
And board members, there's just a few more people that would like to just say a few words on behalf of on this project. I don't think we want to send these people home. We've got a long distance travel and then have to come back in a month's time or 2 months' time to go through this again. I think in all fairness, I think they've waited a long time now for this. They've gone through the process. They've been accepted through the PRAC. Everything was fine. And now we're back to the PAC. So we're reinventing the wheel. But, I just thank you folks for your perseverance on this file. It's a long process. But you'll get your hands full. I can tell you that right now. But, the last meeting was the end of June. I was there, or, near the end of June. And back then, there was a lot of people that we heard from, just like tonight, in person. Tonight's in person, and we've had a lot of people online that were sharing their stories and sharing their beliefs in it. And look, we get it. We understand that. We understand what they're going through and the anxiety, because a lot of it is a fear of the unknown. They don't really know what's going to happen. But the fact is that not one person has come in with some scientific information that substantiates why this facility should not be built. Why is that? Why is that allowed to take place in this society? These people right here have spent a great deal of money on this so far. Their intentions are to spend a lot more, invest a significant amount of money on this facility to move it forward. And they plan to employ good people with good paying jobs. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that equation? I can't really see it. So they want to give back to the community. They want to be part of the community. So why are we going to stop them? Why are we going to halt them? So I think we've got to keep that in mind as you deliberate, but please don't drag this on any further, because these people would like to get on with it. They'd like to get on with the investments. They've had to hold off. They were hoping to have lobsters in the tanks by now, but now this is just process just keeps on going on and going on. So we can't do this to them anymore. So I think Jeremy and I think the chief, Alan Polchis, would like to say a few words just very quickly. So.
Yeah, thanks again for your patience, Chairman, committee. I don't want to sit here and beat on a dead horse or keep everybody up later than we should, but just want to rebuttal a couple points really quick. I appreciate everybody's slides and presentations. Mrs. Reed's slide, which showed our lot entirely in red, was not the accurate size of that building. We have the prints to prove the otherwise. The big trucks going down the road. Once this project is approved, everybody can turn around in our yard, whether it's plow trucks, recycling, boat launch trucks that go by there multiple times a day, so on and so forth. I'm not sure what the issue is with the land survey, but Murphy Surveys did that survey for us in February 2022. As far as I know, it's an accurate survey. If not, let's redo it. The property at the end of the road, LMB Industrial, great neighbor, guy lets us use his property. We got a key to the gate. No issue there. I just want to touch on that. Thanks very much.
Way. Nitalewis Sagam Alan Polches to J. Awasadunsis. Good evening. My name is Chief Alan Polches from St. Mary's First Nation. I'm here with my council members and representing my people. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here on the unceded and unsurrendered territory. You were mentioning that, Madam Chair, in your introductions, but you were cut off with that, so I just wanted to reiterate that. Okay, and I want to thank all the residents of this beautiful territory that has come out this evening to voice, their concerns. Collectively, we are in a society around reconciliation, and together, we as treaty people, you, Madam Chair, your committee, the members that live here in this territory, we're all treated people, and we all have a responsibility, just like the voices we heard this evening. Tonight, I haven't heard one positive remark in reference to the project and to this plant. I became chief in 2018 in St. Mary's, and I became chief to be a leader of my people, to do good, to do better, and to draw a path forward of healing. Unfortunately, we all know the dark history of Indigenous people, not only in this province, but this country that we all call home. But it's my responsibility to lead 2,200 members of my one community. The government has put us all on reserves, little plots of land. Hence why, we outsearch to find land, to do better, to have economic drive. Not sure if you hear the headlines, Madam Chair, and to the committee, and to the people in this room. The province, economic genocide. And we just want to move forward and be able to bring opportunity to our people and to your people. Took us 4 years to sit down and think of this project. 4 years. As we were sitting, exploring lands and opportunities. We worked with several experts, as you heard this evening. We didn't put this all together, but it's my responsibility to ensure that we have an economic drive for our people, to ensure that I'm able to feed 2,200 people in my community. We're taking this project here to this territory, here to this community, and be able to offer jobs, be able to help fix your roads that you're all talking about, be able to, of course, make a partnership for the next generation. So all of our kids that's been talked about this evening, have a path forward. And we're teaching our kids about relationship building. We're teaching them about responsibility. And we're teaching them about value. I'm hearing a lot about value, property value. Fortunately, the Indigenous people don't have that much property because we weren't given that much. But you know what we need to do moving forward is we need to expand, and we need to be able to come together and to be able to have that path forward for all of our children, your children, your grandchildren, our children. So I just want to be standing here and be able to acknowledge this business plan that we've come forward to want to share. And I would hope that you find it in your hearts and find it with all the technicalities of all the information you received this evening, that you make a sound decision. And if there's something that we can continue to do and have a path forward, on behalf of my council and the people of my community, we want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for organizing this forum, and I want to thank all the residents for your voices this evening. And remember, you all have a responsibility. Willie, thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much. Yes. We don't really have a question and answer period at this time, just so you know.
That the fact that this is a proposal from the St. Mary's Band, to my mind, it doesn't matter who the proponent is. This particular project should be in the industrial park. St. Andrews has that for industry. It wouldn't matter if it came from any other business person. I would still be requesting that it not be approved on that lot. Thank you.
Thanks. We're actually going to close the floor for comments right now. I sure do appreciate everyone's attendance and participation. I do understand it's been a long road for everyone, and the committee does have a big job ahead of us. We have volumes of information to look at. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the committee for discussion or what have you. Knowing that it is 9:05 currently, I believe we should table. Oh, please, yes, go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to table.
Turn it on.
It's on, she's not.
I am on, aren't I? I'd like to make a motion to table this application for us to have a chance to digest the information and come back at a later date to make a final decision.
Do we have a seconder for that motion to table? Seconded here, Mr. Kerr. Any further discussion? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of tabling the meeting until a suitable time, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Anyone want to keep going? No? That motion is carried. We will be tabling this meeting. Okay. We will just quickly finish up with our agenda. We do have, where am I here? Sorry, I lost my page already. We do have a question period, although I think we've sort of already had it. But if anyone wants to step to the mic with a final question, I'm happy to take that at this time.
Am I on? Yeah, this proposal is based on whether the applicants can get enough water out of the ground to feed this facility. It's not, yeah, we'll try that, but if it doesn't work, we'll put a pipe out into the ocean. That's not part of this proposal. Now, so the question is, we have a number. This gentleman wants science. Okay, well, I'll give him some. There's 200 liters per minute that they are.
Have you got a question? Right now, we are at question period right now. And so I'm just about to ask the presenter, do you have a question for the committee?
Question is the 200 liters per minute that this facility is.
That's not correct. 75 liters a minute.
75. Well, I've made a calculation closer to 400, but I'd be willing to explain that. That's science.
Have you a question for the committee?
The point I'm making is if they cannot get 200 liters, because that's the number.
75 liters a minute.
That's the number that we got earlier. Then is this proposal dead? And I think that they should be able to prove that that is and also that it's not going to cause saltwater intrusion into freshwater wells. So that's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've already explained that we would have to go through an EIA
I'm someone's
to do this.
Adrian, can you hold
saltwater
on
well
one sec? Can the
Okay.
public just quiet, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Adrian.
We already explained earlier that we would have to go through an EIA to do that saltwater well test. And that EIA would obviously consider the ability of that well to sustainably provide 75 liters per minute, which would be required for this application. We did preliminary testing, but that was only preliminary testing, and the EIA would still be required. And if that EIA finds that we could not sustainably withdraw water, then yes, we would explore putting out a pipeline. And that would go through the federal government. So there are still due processes that would have to be gone through depending upon what our findings are with the well.
Thank you very much. All right. Moving through to PAC member comments. Any comments we have? Did you have something, Paul?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just so the knowledge for the public in the process for the next meeting, due to a number of members being away of PAC during the month of February, this meeting will probably occur in the first or second weekend of March. So in order for all 7 members to be able to deliberate fairly and accordingly, Madam Chair.
Thanks very much, Mr. Nopper. Any other comments from PAC members? All right, there being none, 9:12, this meeting is adjourned.